You know the story, right? We've all seen well-intentioned programs for marginalized communities promise the world but just fizzle out. Today, we're going to dig into a guide called Building Resilient Systems to figure out why that happens and, way more importantly, how to fix it. We're going to turn all that dense strategy into an actual blueprint you can use. So let's get into it. Yeah, it's the question, isn't it? It's something so many of us in this field have asked ourselves. You see a promising initiative get off the ground with so much hope, only to see it sputter out, leaving behind a cynical staff and a community that's no better off. It's a super frustrating cycle. But what if the problem isn't our intentions, but our implementation? Okay, so the guide points to two classic failure modes that I think we'll all recognize. First up, you've got the big bang approach. A new policy drops from on high and everyone is just magically supposed to start doing it. The results? Total chaos, overwhelmed staff, and a slow, quiet slide back to the old way of doing things. Then, on the flip side, you have eternal planning, that endless cycle of meetings and task forces that leads to total analysis paralysis and zero actual change. Both are just recipes for failure. So, what's the alternative? Well, that alternative is a structured three-phase process that's designed to avoid those traps completely. We're going to start with how to build a rock-solid foundation. Then we'll look at how to pilot new ideas and actually learn from them. After that, we'll talk about how to integrate and sustain that change for the long haul. And finally, we'll get to what I think is the most important part, the human elements at the very heart of all this work. All right, so phase one. It's all about building the foundation. And here's the key takeaway, the thing you can't forget. This is not about rushing to try new techniques with program participants. It's about creating the conditions for change by getting your own house in order first. And this is the part that really stood out to me. The guide is incredibly blunt here, warning us to resist that temptation to just skip ahead. It says, and I'm quoting here, that attempting these new practices without this foundation guarantees failure. I mean, that's not a suggestion. It's a stark warning that this groundwork is absolutely 100% non-negotiable. So, what does this foundational work actually look like? Well, it breaks down into four parts. First, you've got to start at the top, with real commitment from leadership. And I'm not talking about lip service. I mean actual resources. Then, you move to the front line, getting your staff ready for what's coming. Next, and this is so critical, you build out entirely new structures for supervision and support. And finally, you start looking at the very environment you work in, your physical spaces, your procedures, through this new lens. And that new kind of support, man, it's a total game changer. Take reflective supervision. This isn't your typical check-the-box management. No, this is about carving out regular, protected time for staff to process the immense emotional weight of this work. It's a safe space to ask, how is this affecting me? Which is just essential if we're going to prevent burnout so they can show up fully for participants. Okay, so once that foundation is solid, and only once it's solid, then we can move to phase two, pilots and learn. This is where we start to see some action, but in a really smart, contained way. You should think of it like your organization's R&D department. It's a learning laboratory, not some high-stakes, all-or-nothing final exam. So how does this phase work? It's all about being strategic. You don't just roll it out everywhere. You carefully select one pilot team. Then you implement the new approach, but you create these constant feedback loops with both staff and participants. The entire time, your only goal is to learn and to document everything, so you're actually ready for what comes next. This slide just nails the mindset shift you have to make. The goal of a pilot isn't to get a perfect score. It's not about winning. The goal is to learn, to ask what's working, what's not, what totally surprised us. It's all about gathering that real-world data to make the whole approach stronger before you even think about scaling up. And all that learning brings us to phase three, integrate and sustain. This is the big one. This is where a special project starts to transform into just the way we do things here. The goal is to embed these new practices so deeply that they become part of your organization's actual DNA. So this phase starts with a staged rollout, using your now experienced pilot team as mentors for other teams. But the real work here is transforming the entire culture. I mean, it changes the language you use in meetings, the line items in your budgets, everything. And that requires building new systems for quality assurance and, crucially, a solid plan to keep it all going for the long term. And it's so important to understand that full integration isn't some finish line you cross where everything is suddenly perfect. It's an ongoing commitment. It's that moment when trauma responsive stops being an initiative you're doing and becomes a core part of who you are as an organization.
So we've covered the how, the 3 phases, but now we need to talk about the why. And this is the heart of the work, because ultimately all these structures, all these processes, they serve one single purpose: to support your staff so they can create genuine psychological safety for the people they serve. To do that, we have to acknowledge a serious occupational hazard: secondary trauma. This is the real and profound impact that hearing and witnessing traumatic stories has on our staff. It literally changes how they see the world, and it leads directly to burnout if it's not addressed at an organizational level. And this is absolutely critical. Preventing the secondary trauma we just talked about is an organizational responsibility, not an individual one. This isn't about telling burned out staff to just do more yoga. No, it's about the organization creating the conditions for wellness: manageable caseloads, real reflective supervision, and a culture where asking for help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness. And when staff feel supported, they can create this for participants: true psychological safety. And as this slide shows, safety isn't just one thing. It means a participant feels physically safe, of course, but also emotionally safe from shame, relationally safe through trust, and identity safe, feeling seen for who they really are. It's creating a space where it is truly safe to just be. A huge part of creating that safety is this powerful shift in perspective, moving from a deficit-based view to a strengths-based one. So instead of seeing hypervigilance, we can see an expert ability to read a room. Instead of aggression, we see powerful self-advocacy. This isn't about ignoring challenges. It's about finally honoring the sophisticated survival skills that people have been forced to develop. Ultimately, if you take just one thing away from this whole explainer, please let it be this: implementing a trauma-responsive model is not about adding a new module to your program or putting a new checkbox on a form. It is fundamental culture change that touches every single part of your organization. And that brings us to the final question, the one to take back to your team. Looking honestly at your organization right now, your leadership, your policies, your culture, which phase of this blueprint are you actually ready for? Because being honest with that answer, that's the real first step toward creating change that actually lasts.